Hidden in one of Bach's earliest lessons for Wilhelm Friedemann lies an explanation of how he actually formed his open notes. Johann Sebastian Bach's musical notation was documented by Yoshitake Kobayashi, offering a chronological view of his artistic and calligraphic development. In his introduction to Bach's script forms, we find a concise overview of the half note. In this video, we delve into this categorization. By focusing specifically on the positioning of the quill, we will establish a different subdivision based on strokes and shadings, one that serves as a tool for observation and understanding. The naming of the subcategories, such as bird head and mouth shape, is charming. Here imagination reigns supreme. The last subcategory, with the characteristic of non-collecting lines, is an overarching one. The examples in the previous three can satisfy it. Noteworthy, there are only two examples given with an upward pointing stem, suggesting that the downward form is the underlying model. In addition, the translucency of the ink in the original manuscripts has been replaced by a uniform tint, a simplification and reduction. In Bach's manuscripts, the varying transparency of the ink provides vital information about pace and pressure, truly sculpting the beauty of the notation. Let's take the collection of the Well-Tempered Clavier and compare Kobayashi's forms with an actual autograph. For example, the 8th Prelude, which contains many half notes. The ink used here appears to be bistre, a beautiful translucent walnut brown. The collection suffered significantly from the chiffon silk used to cover the pages for several decades during the last century. Intended for protection, it tragically bound with the ink over time. Upon its removal, a significant portion of the ink was ripped away. Despite these scars, we can form a good idea of what the score would have looked like in its original state. Let's focus on the half notes. We see a wide variety of forms. We might even suspect that Kobayashi took this piece as a starting point for his inventory. The standard forms and the mouth occur abundantly, with both open and closed forms. No birds have nested into the staff. It is hardly surprising, given that the concave curvature of the lower line stands perpendicular to its convex standard, the exception that confirms the rule. From a slightly broader perspective, we might perceive the presence of the other categories in one and the same piece as an indication that they do not serve as a reliable tool to map the development of Bach's authorship over half a century. The inner spaces seem a bit more teardrop-shaped than round, disregarding the fact that real droplets tend to be almost perfectly spherical due to surface tension. To bring the individuality of the hand into sharper view, we can compare it to a copy. Bach introduced several well-tempered preludes as calligraphy exercises for his 10-year-old son, Wilhelm Friedemann. Located at the beginning of his notebook, it remains incomplete and contains rhythmic imperfections. Keyboard technically, it is not a beginner's piece. Amazingly enough, these pages belong to Friede's first steps in music notation, and he did it really wonderfully. For the half notes, we see that Friede, like droplets, gravitates towards the more perfect circle. Such an attraction to a Platonic ideal is hardly individual. On the contrary, it reflects a common tendency, to perceive open notes as perfect circles and to write them as such, a form of beginner's conformism. The circle has strong symbolic force, a beloved topic in philosophical views of the worlds, such as the Baroque concept of the circulatio, divine order. In painting and drawing, it therefore occupied a prominent place. In Vasari's overview of artist biographies, we have the story of how Giotto managed to secure a major commission for frescoes by drawing a perfect circle, freehand. It became an expression for mastery with which Rembrandt, for example, positioned himself. What was the craft that enabled artists to succeed in drawing a perfectly round circle freehand? The key was to select a point on the arm, the shoulder, the elbow, the palm or a finger, and anchor it as the center point. From there, a line could be drawn with a fixed radius. The scale of the small half notes lacks such a pivotal pivot point for controlled motor skills. Calligraphers had to adopt a different strategy. We find a fine demonstration of the mindset that could accompany this in the work of Jan van den Velde. He wrote a manual for writing masters to teach calligraphy. His examples show a very steady hand and unsurpassed artistry. Amidst all this beauty, we find a very modern-looking sheet. To describe what is happening here, we can quote words from Pablo Picasso. Style is the difference between a circle and the way you draw it. The openness of a circle is an artistic principle. The physical and mental embrace of deviation from perfect geometry, shaped by individual motor skills. Not imperfection, but deviation is the essence of mastery, something worth marveling at. Before we dissect Bach's strokes more in detail during a calligraphy demonstration for Friede in one of his first lessons, let us take a closer look at modern music notation of open notes for comparison and context. In 1973, Clinton Rumer published a manual for copying music by hand. Regarding whole notes, he lists common errors and provides instructions for correct notation. Non-contiguous lines are rejected as incorrect. What is striking in his exposition is the absence of shading. The lines maintain the same thickness throughout. The plump clumsiness is thus far removed from Van den Velde's elegance. But Rumer's notation is not representative of modern music notation based on engraved lines. With the broad tip of a quill, both thin and thick lines can be drawn, depending on the writing angle. This visual vocabulary was taken over in modern notation practice for the shape of the open notes. In this score of the modern Bach edition, we see a tilted oval shape, in which the long sides are thick and the short ones thin. Half notes point to the upper right, whole notes to the left, a contrast that is an early 19th century invention to enhance readability and which became a general convention. The entire musical score exudes geometric regularity, you might say maybe more emotionally a sterile monotony, which has seemingly erased every individual choice and gesture. Seemingly, although it might evoke the illusion of Platonic essence. The whole is a collection of historical conventions, the work of a relatively small group, and modern editions do indeed have different elaborations. The choice to give whole and half notes a mirrored appearance seems to detach it from the gesture of a quill in the hand of a calligrapher. Armed with this brief observation regarding physical logic, and with Kobayashi's categories in mind, we can now turn our attention to Bach's demonstration. We can imagine the scene. Bach is not alone, but under the watchful eye of Friede, the inquisitive, talented and eager son. It is the second or third lesson, and Sebastian is calligraphing a simple prelude. We will limit ourselves for a moment to the whole notes and the ties on the lower staff line of the final measures. We can see what their actual father-son chattering was about, the foundation of Kobayashi's distinctions. There is one whole note that is different if we pay attention to the shadows. That note is written with the positioning of the quill, exactly as Bach applied it in the 8th Prelude of the Well-Tempered Clavier, a piece that contains nearly all of Kobayashi's forms. We can label this category as musical angle. The other whole notes and the ties are written in the quill position used in the italic cursive. We might label this lettering angle. Two different modes which distribute their shadowing in opposites. This was the heart of their conversation. Next to the whole note in musical angle, he repeats the same note in lettering angle to show exactly how the shadows shift from thick to thin. To illustrate the impact of the angle, he draws the bottom line horizontally, a thick lower lip. Now there was a whole note too many, which Bach erased with a swipe of his finger after his explanation, clearing the mouth with his hand. Besides, incidentally, the prelude gives us reason to expand Kobayashi's aviary with a new species. Fledgling Friede saw how a nested egg-shaped standard cracked in two the iris. The nib faltered therewithal even to such an extent that a flurry of dark tears winked across the pages. Chance has the eyeball of the rare bird iris giving a meaningful wink to our inky topic, the intentional delineation of species. We will now go through it once more, but this time with a physical demonstration of the calligraphy and a dissection of the individual lines. Our goal is to finally establish a new subdivision, a tool for describing, determining and inventorying exactly what is to be seen based on how the quill was held. We begin with the word Preludium 8. At the rounding of the capital letter, the angle of the quill is approximately 40 degrees. The oblique upward movement to the right is thin, while the oblique downward movement becomes thicker. This is a hallmark of the italic font, which we will encounter later with the half notes in Friedemann's notebook. The number 8, made up of two circles, is written at the same angle. In the notation of the 3 versus 2 units of the measure, the quill is tilted again, now to the position for musical notation. The vertical stems are gossamer thin. The horizontal gesture results in a thick shadow. The perfect right angle of the stems indicate that Bach writes with calm and care. For the half notes, he remains in the position prescribed for thin vertical stems and thick horizontal beams. That position makes connecting the lines within a circle or oval-shaped notehead difficult. Instead of a single movement, the form is built up from separate, individual strokes, just as is customary with letters. The dense stacking could cause line overlaps that could negatively impact readability. To avoid this, Bach chooses to compose the oval either below or above with a straight separate element, the shape Kobayashi labeled as the mouth. In Friedemann's lesson, whole notes are situated in a sea of open space. They do not have to take nearby neighbors into account. Bach chooses there to change the position of the quill to that of the Italian lettering. Connecting the lines is ergonomically easy. After all, the italic was designed for clarity and speed. The slanted ovals are closed. They radiate with the elegance of Van den Velde's artwork. Some cautious conclusions. Kobayashi doesn't sum up a chronology of styles in his scheme of open notes, but rather notices some symptoms disconnected from the anatomy of the gesture. Ideals about ideal forms influence how people perceive and reproduce notation. Simple, basic knowledge of calligraphy is not deeply embedded in Bach literature. Let's say that we have gone around in the circle of discussion, but the ends do not meet. Instead, they move in a spiral. I regard these insights more as a preliminary exploration than as a conquered territory. With this inventory of angles, we have created a tool to observe and evaluate the development of Bach's calligraphy. The virtual documented conversation between Friede and Sebastian brings the principle into focus. A brief glimpse, a comma in our research into Bach's hand, full of promise for what is to come.